Tonight, wildfires continue to burn across Ontario and the West. We talked to one woman from BC who had to evacuate twice.
Someone calls to the department, says, I'm concerned, that a child may be in need of protection or a family needs assistance. They're not tracking every referral coming in.
Nunavut has the highest child sex abuse rate in Canada. The territory's child advocate says the government isn't doing enough to help kids at risk. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Indigenous voter turnout was strong in 2019 and even stronger in 2015, but with the discovery of unmarked graves being found outside of residential schools across the country, will more take to the polls this coming election? Tamara Pimentel reports.
The discovery of unmarked graves at residential school sites has taken the country by storm. While it was a shock to many Canadians, it isn't news to the Indigenous community, and calls for reconciliation within the Canadian government are stronger than ever. So how will this affect Indigenous voter turnout? In Winnipeg, Danny Ray says she hopes that number spikes in this upcoming election.
There's a lot of change that needs to happen. There's a lot of advocacy for Indigenous rights right now, and people are upset.
Ray's son is Indigenous, and she's one of many taking part in this camp on the grounds of the Manitoba legislature honoring the children found.
Could see it go either way. Like, they could end up just saying, we don't want to participate with government affairs right now. Elections
Canada said in 2015, turnout for on-reserve voters across the country was 66%. That number went up 1% in 2019. Shauna Peliquin is an organizer with the camp.
I always vote because I like to complain, and for me that gives me the authority to complain about who I vote for.
Chris Adams, political studies professor at the University of Manitoba, says he doesn't expect Indigenous voter turnout to rise.
We've had a number of years of the Trudeau Liberals in power, so there's less excitement about turning things over. Secondly, I think things are snapping back to the historical pattern.
Adams says in Manitoba, NDP incumbents could benefit as they represent ridings with high Indigenous populations.
I think that there's a lot of disappointment, but also that Indigenous people right now have a lot of things to worry about more than whatever ego trip the candidate are going for.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
Well, it is day 4 of the federal election. While party leaders are crisscrossing the country making announcements, very little has been said on Indigenous issues. Joining me now is Nigan Sinclair, a professor at the University of Manitoba and a columnist for the Winnipeg Free Press. So, it's early days, obviously. We haven't heard much about Indigenous issues so far, but what do you see as the Indigenous-specific issues that are going to come up during this 36-day campaign?
Well, as always, the big question for many Indigenous peoples is whether to vote in the first place, because regardless of how many times we vote, we've had the vote since 1960, things don't tend to change very drastically. Very small, ornamental, incremental changes take place. So the question is a lot of regional issues, mostly around boil water advisories, issue around the implementation of the calls to the action during the TRC, or the Murder Missing Indigenous Women and Girls calls for justice, or other issues involving justice and regionality. But the fact is that Indigenous peoples have to choose first to vote, and then predominantly what are the issues that will be attached, because as usual, the Liberals have promised big, under-delivered, and this is really a referendum on whether they deserve a majority or not.
Well, and exactly to that point, in 2015 election, as we know, record numbers of Indigenous people turned out to the polls and helped push the Liberals to a majority, or maybe perhaps more accurately sent Stephen Harper's Conservatives packing, depending how you choose to look at it. But then in 2019, not the case, right? More of us stayed home. So I guess what are you anticipating in terms of Indigenous voter turnout this time around? Somewhere between 2015, 2019? What do you think?
Yeah, 2019 saw about a 10% drop-off on reserve. It's very hard, of course, to keep track of urban numbers, Métis numbers, but on reserve voting dropped about 10%, and I think it's directly because of apathy involving the Liberals and involving their great promises. I mean, in fact, those promises, many of the promises the Liberals made were just untenable. Trying to say we're going to implement all of 94 calls to action in one term is impossible, so why make the promise in the first place? The fact is that they haven't delivered on major issues, and that's on issues like, for example, boil water advisories. They've only dealt with about 2/3 of those. Now, that is a landmark achievement, but it still hasn't delivered on the promise. And the fact is that in most areas of the country, almost no change has taken place. In fact, things have gotten worse. Poverty's gotten worse. Youth suicides have gotten worse. We're seeing record numbers of homelessness, most of them that are Indigenous on the prairies here, as just an example. And the answer that the Liberals have provided for homelessness is to move the measure of homelessness so that it appears there's less homeless people than they're really dealing with the issue. So the fact is that I think we're probably going to see more apathy this time around, but we also have a record number of Indigenous peoples who are participating in the election as running as candidates. So that may spell off some kind of loss of interest in the Liberals, for example, or major political parties, and it may be more of a regional election like we saw with Jody Wilson-Raybould getting a great deal of local support.
In 2019, 10 Indigenous candidates were elected to the House of Commons. That's one fewer than in 2015. We've also seen some high-profile Indigenous politicians announce that they're not going to be seeking re-election, though. How do you think it's all going to come out in the wash in terms of when all the votes are had? What do you think we'll have in terms of representation in the House of Commons?
Well, if the early numbers indicate we will see a record number of candidates this time around, we will see more people running, particularly for the NDP Liberals, but you're also seeing a great deal, a number of people who are self-identifying as Métis and running for the Conservatives. Good, bad, great, ugly, whatever that looks like. The fact is that there are people who are probably going to be checking the box of indigeneity, whether we like it or not, and there probably will be a record number of candidates this time around.
Well, I suspect you, like us, will be very keen to watch this all unfold over the next month and see where we come out in the end of it. Thanks so much for taking the time to share your thoughts with us.
Miigwech, thanks.
And in a first, APTN News will be involved in the federal leaders' debates. I will be one of the journalists asking questions in the English debate, which will be held on Thursday, September 9th. You can watch it right here on APTN that evening, along with some special debate analysis. The debates will also be translated in 6 Indigenous languages: Dene, Inuktitut, and Plains Cree for the English debate, and then the East Cree, Innu, and Ojibwe for the French debate. Well, we want to hear what you think about the upcoming election. What do you think the biggest issues should be? Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. You can leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. BC First Nations leaders are calling on the federal and provincial governments to end fossil fuel subsidies and take action on climate change, following a United Nations Code Red report warning of human-caused greenhouse gases. The First Nations Leadership Council demanded immediate climate action in light of the recent heat waves and the current massive raging wildfires that are threatening communities. As a first step, they called on the government to stop fossil fuel industry subsidies and to commit to aggressively reducing carbon emissions.
We're putting the word out that we need to add emphasis to decarbonizing our economy, meaning moving away from the billions of dollars that get invested in oil and gas exploration and development by government.
Nunavut has Canada's youngest population, and it also has a rate of sex crimes against youth 10 times the national average. Nunavut's child youth advocate is ringing an alarm bell, saying that not enough is being done to address that statistic. Kent Driscoll has this from Iqaluit.
Back in June, Nunavut's child and youth advocate told MLAs that child sex abuse in Nunavut is a crisis that the government can't even really measure because of poor tracking. Jane Bates tells us why.
Family Services is the primary department who protects children, basically, responds to child abuse and neglect, and what they primarily are not tracking are referrals. So what that means is someone calls to the department, says, I'm concerned that a child may be in need of protection or a family needs assistance. They're not tracking every referral coming in.
Why is that important? It's hard to figure out a solution when you don't know how big the problem is.
When you're not doing that, what's happening is you can't say, I received 50 referrals regarding child sexual abuse. I received 30 referrals on physical abuse, or we're doing 100 referrals for, just supporting families and getting help. So that was one of the, we were quite surprised to find out that they hadn't been tracking that accurately, because again, it informs your business.
There's a word they use in government, siloing, when different parts of the government don't communicate with other parts. In this case, it isn't just family services not tracking cases. Many government agencies deal with youth.
One of the recommendations of Our Minds Matter and previously of Standing Committee was to develop an interagency protocol for information sharing and coordination of services. And that's a recommendation that's kind of outstanding and that we're monitoring. And that would really govern and help assist departments working together.
The Territorial Assembly comes back for their final session in September. Then there's an election in October. Recommendations will be made in September, but it will be up to a new government to make sure they're followed up on. Ken Driscoll, APTN National News, Halloween.
Time for us to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk to a wildfire evacuee who has gone through 2 evacuations this summer. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, wildfires continue to burn across the country. Some communities are days or weeks into evacuations, while some are actually returning home. And in some regions, tinder dry conditions are actually worsening. With more, here's Daryl Stranger.
Heat waves and dry conditions continue to fuel the wildfires burning across the country. Now in Ontario, there are over 100 wildfires burning, and that has led to another First Nation community being evacuated to London, Ontario, according to Ontario officials. The ministry can confirm that 347 community members from Wapsimaung Independent Nations remain in host communities. It is anticipated that they will begin returning to their community tomorrow. Now, 5 First Nations communities in Ontario have returned home since being evacuated. In Saskatchewan, there are 96 active wildfires. 5 of those are not contained, and they have had 559 fires to date in the province. Now, here in Manitoba, there are 124 active wildfires. 17 of those are out of control, and it has affected numerous First Nations communities here in the province. Jason Small of the Canadian Red Cross provided an update on First Nations in Manitoba.
Currently, there are 2 First Nations that are out of their homes that we're currently supporting. That's Little Grand Rapids First Nation and Pungassi First Nation. Last week, people who had evacuated from Barons River First Nation, Bloodvein First Nation, Tatasqueyak Cree Nation, and NCN all returned home. So now we just have the folks from the 2 First Nations. They're all staying in hotels in the Winnipeg area. And right now, it's about 1,500 people that we're supporting.
Alberta only has 33 active wildfires, but they have seen over 1,100 wildfires to date in their province. Now, British Columbia has 264 wildfires currently burning, and tourists are being asked to avoid affected communities. Now, Highway 1 between Lytton and Cache Creek remains closed because of a mudslide. Now, as of yesterday evening, there are over 100 evacuation orders and alerts, and they affect over 9,000 properties in British Columbia. Now, this year, the provinces we mentioned have doubled or nearly doubled their wildfire totals from last year and the yearly averages. Now, there is expected to be some relief for the prairies as rain is expected in the forecast over the next few days. Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Since April, there have been more than 1,500 wildfires in British Columbia. Now, raging fires in the province's interior have forced nearly 5,000 people from their homes. Carol Jean Louis Bissette, along with her husband and their 3 grandchildren, have been forced to evacuate from their home in Vernon twice now. Dennis Ward had a chance to speak with her from an evacuation center in Osoyoos.
Carol, thanks so much for taking some time for us here today. How are you and your family feeling?
Oh, I'm still stressed in our second evacuation. And I'm not sure if our house is still standing. They moved us 50-something miles away from home.
Like you say, Carol, your second evacuation. Can you tell us a bit about, how long you were able to stay home for there and how quickly you had to move again?
We evacuated the Sun Peak past Kamloops on August 6th to the August 9th. And they said they rescinded the evacuation order. So we had to, we went home. And they evacuated us 2 days ago again to Osoyoos. We're at a Spirit Ridge hotel in Osoyoos, BC.
How would you describe the scene around your home?
When we left, it was at 4 o'clock. It was dark. And they told us to keep our vehicles loaded from when we went to Sun Peaks and Kamloops. So we did, and at 4, everything changed, and the sky was just red. It was dark, and somebody phoned and said, "You guys have to get out now," and we go, "Oh, here we go again." So this time we took 2 vehicles. I had important documents and fireproof safes and some clothes, and had to leave a lot of other stuff behind, and like family pictures, and couldn't take everything. So, and it was traumatic for us because our other home burnt down in 2006. We rebuilt and everything, and I'm scared this one's going to be not there. And the whole reserve is evacuated, Okanagan Indian Band. So we don't know. I was going to put my security camera up, and I bought one, and can't. We didn't get to put it up, so can't see what's going on there.
Awful stuff.
But the highway is closed, and nobody's allowed down West Side Road where we live, except fire trucks and fire personnel and stuff like that, RCMP and that.
Carol, any idea when you might be able to head back home?
I don't know, they sent us too soon, and the fires consumed a lot. You come near our end, up on the hill there, and people say they can see it from the where our house is on the hillside are coming down, and I think we'll be here for a while. And that now, because they sent us home too early.
Well,
and terrible.
It sounds terrible, Carol. We'll have to leave it there, but wishing you and your family all the best there. Stay safe, and hope everything's good back home. Appreciate you joining us.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
A young man from Manitoba has started a journey cycling from Vancouver to Halifax to raise money for youth suicide crisis that's happening in his community. Michelle Carlinzig met up with him.
Last week, 25-year-old Riley Niepenak started a roughly 6,000-kilometer bicycle journey across Canada. He's cycling from Vancouver to Halifax to raise money and awareness for the youth of his home community, Tatasqueyak Cree Nation. Youth from the remote community north of Winnipeg are taking their lives at an alarming rate. They've declared a state of emergency this summer, and Niepenak wants to change that.
I wanted to do something that would show them that, there's a lot of people that care about them and are willing to, go to the extreme to show that.
Niepenak started out in Vancouver last week and just past Canmore, Alberta. So far, his GoFundMe has reached $11,000. This isn't the first time he's shown an interest in helping out Indigenous youth. On June of last year, he started a volunteer foot patrol group called Initiative that walks the streets of Winnipeg watching out for youth. When Niepenak bought a new bike, he decided to start the journey. While he says he's not a professional biker, he wants to empower others.
I just also wanted to show the youth, from all over that you can do this. If you really put your mind to it, you can do things like this as well.
Niepenak says he's received support throughout his journey so far from family and home community. He hopes to finish his journey in roughly 6 weeks. and will let the youth of Tataskoyak Cree Nation decide what to do with the funds. Michelle Karlenzig, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Well, it's time for us to take another break, but when we come back, a new book is in the works by Tanya Talaga. We'll tell you all about that. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. This beautiful summer day was sent to us by Faith Villeneuve. It's some alto cumulus clouds over the Paddle Prairie Métis settlement in Alberta. When you see something amazing, be sure to take a picture and send it to share@aptn.ca. You can be our next photo of the day. Let's take a look now at tomorrow's weather forecast. To the east coast, we got 26 in sunshine for St. John's, 24 with some cloud for Halifax. Happy Valley Goose Bay, 26 in sunshine, rain in Nain and 14 degrees there. Saguenay, 29, and Quebec City, same thing. 31 and showers expected for Toronto, 29 in sunshine for Sault Ste. Marie. Kapuskasing, 21 with a chance of showers, 32 in Timmins. The Pas, you've got a chance of showers, 19 degrees there, 12 with a mix of sun and cloud in Churchill. 30 and showers for Winnipeg, Dauphin 18 and showers. 16 and rain for Swift Current, 18 for Regina and Yorkton and chance of showers there too. 20 and sunshine for La Ronge, 16 and showers for Stony Rapids. 20 for Fort Mac and Peace River with a chance of showers there. Edmonton showers and 19, sunshine and 19 for Lethbridge. Kamloops showers and 26 degrees, 23 in Quesnel with some cloud there. Prince Rupert 15 and showers, 21 and sunshine for Smithers. 14 and sunny for Dawson City, 18 in Watson Lake, sunshine there. 15 for Wattie and Wrigley with a chance of showers, same with Norman Wells. 15 and sunny for Fort McPherson, Colville Lake, 13, sunshine there. 14 and sunny in Baker Lake and Chesterfield, 8 in Cambridge Bay with some cloud. Tallyoak and Joe Haven, both 14 with a mix of sun and cloud. Journalist and award-winning writer Tanya Talaga has been signed by HarperCollins Canada to write 3 new books. They will be nonfiction about residential schools, with the first one scheduled to be released in 2023. It's going to focus on the discovery of unmarked graves at these residential school sites and how that discovery resonated with Canadians and the rest of the world. Talaga said that every Indigenous family in Canada has been touched by this trauma of these schools, and it's time the children are honored and their voices heard. Motorists in Ontario's Frontenac Provincial Park recently found themselves in what has to be one of the most quintessential Canadian traffic jams ever. Cars were forced to stop as a beaver dragged a very large branch across the road. After tying up traffic for a short amount of time, the critter disappeared into the woods, where the branch will undoubtedly form part of his new home. Looks like he just got caught. Well, that's your midweek news. Thanks all so much for joining us. We'd love to have you. Dennis Ward is going to be back in the host seat tomorrow. Until then, have a great night.